Everyone needs to know the effects the Trump administration's mass deportations of illegal immigrants will have on every U.S. citizen in the coming days, weeks, and months. With initial focus being on dangerous individuals, newly appointed Border Czar Tom Hallman has made clear the administration's intent is to expand that focus to remove all illegal immigrants. The Trump administration's aggressive removal policy is sending shockwaves through several industries, and these effects will soon impact the broader economy. Unlike temporary disruptions caused by weather emergencies or health crises, this trend represents a profound structural change, permanently removing a large segment of the labor force. Sectors that rely heavily on undocumented workers, agriculture, construction, hospitality, food processing, and domestic services, are already facing labor shortages. Growers will face challenges to harvest crops on time, which may lead to crop waste and price increases. Construction projects will likely slow due to a lack of laborers, and restaurants may be forced to cut back hours due to a shortage of kitchen staff. With fewer workers available, employers will now need to compete for legal workers, driving up wages. While this will benefit some American-born and documented workers, businesses in labor-intensive industries are now faced with shrinking profit margins. Small businesses are the least likely to be able to absorb higher wages, leading many to fail. Higher wages, supply chain disruptions, and labor shortages are expected to bring price increases for goods and services, at least in the short term. Food prices are set to rise as agricultural producers struggle to replace lost workers. Home construction costs are certain to increase, exacerbating housing affordability issues, as many builders' workforces include significant numbers of highly skilled yet undocumented tradesmen not easily replaced. In industries like food processing and manufacturing, these labor losses will certainly accelerate automation to mitigate worker shortages. However, full-scale automation is too expensive and time-consuming to implement for all but the largest producers, leaving a gap between worker loss and technological adaptation. Some of the long-term effects of the mass deportations currently underway will likely be unexpected yet no less impactful. Some industries may shrink due to an inability to replace undocumented workers. Small farms may close or consolidate into larger, more mechanized operations. The restaurant industry might see fewer independent businesses, with larger chains better equipped to absorb costs. The construction sector could rely more on imported prefabricated housing components to reduce labor needs. The U.S. workforce is aging, and birth rates are declining. With strict border enforcement set to drastically reduce the influx of undocumented workers, labor shortages are on track to become chronic in the near term, leading to long-term economic stagnation. Historically, continuous immigration has supported the workforce, but mass and permanent deportation of this segment of workers combined with unprecedented border enforcement will create a labor shortage some experts believe will be problematic at best and possibly catastrophic. Some industries may shift production overseas to countries where labor remains cheaper. Food processing companies, for example, could relocate parts of their supply chains to Mexico or Central America. Contrasting this are the current administration's stance on favoring increased tariffs on offshore manufacturers. Whether the construction industry begins a trend toward prefabricated components of foreign manufacture depends on factors for which data is not yet sufficient to support confident prediction. A huge percentage of farm workers in the U.S. are undocumented. Without them, food production will likely decline, and the U.S. could become more dependent on imported produce. Undocumented workers also make up a substantial portion of the labor force in home building, roadwork, and commercial development. The service industry will be hardest hit, where restaurants, hotels, and resorts rely in large part on undocumented workers for kitchen, housekeeping, and maintenance roles. Meatpacking and food production facilities will soon face the absence of large numbers of undocumented workers. Disruptions in production, supply chain issues, and in resulting higher grocery prices seem inevitable. Many removed undocumented workers provided in home care for children, elderly individuals, and disabled persons. Their removal will add to an already growing shortage of critical caregiver services. The loss of undocumented workers will soon negatively impact productivity and consumer spending. These workers contribute billions to the economy through consumption, rent, and taxes, despite their undocumented status. Their absence means fewer dollars circulating in local economies, resulting in business closures and reduced tax revenue. While some argue that the latest enforcement and removal policies are creating more jobs for native-born workers, the data shows that few Americans are willing to take low-skill, physically demanding jobs, even at higher pay. Efforts to fill farm worker roles with American workers have repeatedly failed, with similar patterns emerging across other industries. To sum up, everyone should take note of our country's current state of economic affairs. The permanent loss of undocumented workers and its unforeseen consequences will ripple through our entire economy in the coming weeks. Some economists warn that rising costs, industry disruptions, and a shrinking labor force will slow economic growth and increase inflation. While businesses may adapt through automation or outsourcing, the transition will be costly and prolonged, and many small businesses won't survive. In the absence of immigration reform that balances enforcement with labor needs, industries that depend on these workers now face an uncertain future. Please like, share, and subscribe.